SpongeBob SquarePants!
SpongeBob SquarePants is... well, unless you grew up incredibly sheltered or under a literal rock, I doubt I really need to explain it. Created by marine biologist Stephen Hillenburg, this cartoon shaped the sense of humor and childhoods of countless people. It's charming, well-written, and lots of fun. At least the first 3 seasons are. These seasons are praised way more than the rest of the show, as unfortunately later seasons have succumbed to character flanderization, lazier writing, and unnecessary contemporary references. But not a lot of people talk about the low points in the first 3 seasons. Are there any even low spots, any bad episodes? I'm going to be taking a look at them by going on iMDB and talking about the episodes with the lowest ratings. After giving my thoughts, I'll also be discussing my personal least favorites of each season. I realize that 2 11-minute segments count as one episode, so for the sake of clarity, I'll just be discussing both. Let's dive right in, starting with Season 1. The lowest rated episodes are... This one doesn't surprise me, to be honest. Season 1 is a strong start, but not SpongeBob's best season, and many of the episodes I feel are pretty forgettable. The premise of Sandy's rocket is pretty out there. Bringing up the moon and space, not to mention aliens, this early into the show diverges from the grounded, tight-knit community of Bikini Bottom that we've been learning about so far. Here's the rundown of what happens. SpongeBob runs to Sandy's house shouting for some undisclosed reason.
Hey Sandy! Hey Sandy! Hey Sandy!
And sees that she's building a rocket to go to the moon. He wants to come with, but Sandy's hesitant to let him come aboard after he messed up her last experiment and literally killed people.
No way, SpongeBob! Especially after your little mishap with my whirly-bird.
Eventually, she relents and says he can come along, which leads to him boarding the ship early after some persuasion from Patrick. They launch the ship, some shenanigans happen, and they crash back into Bikini Bottom thinking they're on the moon. Then, they start capturing citizens thinking they're aliens. Other than the scene where they capture Squidward, which has some really funny jokes in my opinion.
No! It's an egg sac! Let's look at the embryo. Twins.
There aren't many memorable moments in this episode. You don't really get to see SpongeBob or Patrick react to supposedly being on the moon, other than immediately bagging up the citizens, which is why the scene with Squidward works. You get to see how they see him through the lens of them thinking he's an alien. Like, yeah, an alien doing whatever this is would freak someone out. I feel like there were so many opportunities for creative scenarios that were left out. And if Sandy's jetpack could take her to the moon, why build a rocket at all? This episode just plays out without many interesting or funny things happening. SpongeBob and Patrick's stupidity does get a bit stale for me. There are some strange things that stand out for me, like SpongeBob's sleeping hat I never remember him wearing, Mr. Krabs having a pet worm that never shows up again, and seeing Flats the Flounder as an incidental before he got his own episode later on. The faces that are drawn over the bags look off to me, and this ending is also weird in my opinion.
Uh-oh.
SpongeBob, we aliens would like to work with you!
As a kid, I was confused and I thought that the joke was that the moon had aliens, and that they were just like the Bikini Bottomites. But because you don't see anyone, it's probably just the people trapped on the ship being annoyed at SpongeBob. Even though Patrick's also partially to blame? I don't know. Overall, a solid but mostly forgettable episode. Squeaky Boots is my least favorite of the 2. The plot is that Mr. Krabs gives SpongeBob a pair of cheap squeaky boots after his daughter Pearl rejects them, selling him the lie that it'll make him a better fry cook. The squeaking gets so annoying that Squidward takes a vacation, and Mr. Krabs decides to eventually take the boots away. I feel like the Krusty Krab isn't actually this close to SpongeBob's house. Anyway, the squeaking somehow persists, and Mr. Krabs, driven to actual insanity, reveals he hid the boots under the floorboards a la the Telltale Heart, then shrinks them down and eats them, naturally. This episode is honestly as annoying as the titular Squeaky Boots. Most of it feels like it's just SpongeBob dicking around with the boots, and the squeaking is just as obnoxious to me as it is to the other characters. This whole segment with Mr. Krabs in the window doesn't go anywhere. It's not very funny slapstick to me. Honestly, the parts I laughed the most at were unintentional humor, like the blatantly reused animation. Hey, I understand budgeting can be an issue, but it still looks funny. especially with this weird elongated shot of SpongeBob opening his mouth. This episode isn't all bad though. It's the first appearance of Pearl. I like this little moment where Squidward actually seems to be enjoying cleaning this random glass. And it is sweet that Mr. Krabs gets the shoes that Pearl really wanted by the end of the episode. I also like the background here. It's nice to see some environmental world building of areas outside of Bikini Bottom. You know, other than the moon. Side note, the moment of Mr. Krabs losing his mind makes me realize that these extreme facial expressions work much better for comedy in small doses, and not relied on for a cheap laugh. Other than everything I already discussed, this episode is fine. Not that great, but not offensively bad. I'm not gonna rewatch it anytime soon. Now let's talk about some episodes I personally don't like, even though they aren't the lowest rated. Starting with... Can I even really count this as an episode? This was originally made as an extension to the pilot since Help Wanted wasn't long enough to fill its 11-minute block. But due to the extra cost it would have taken to pay the voice actors for a separate production, this episode has no dialogue. SpongeBob does technically say, "You!" but only in text. You! There's also no music during the title card, only seagull sounds. These facts combined make this episode, if you can call it that, feel really off. Granted, the show just began at this point, so I can't be too harsh. It can't really save this episode for me though. Squidward brushes a piece of clam into SpongeBob's front yard, and he goes to extreme lengths with his reef blower to get it clean. That's it. This episode is very boring, aside from some fun visual stuff. Another one that I'm not rushing to rewatch. If any of you thought something along the lines of, "I've never heard of this episode," I wouldn't blame you at all. This episode is paired up with Valentine's Day, which is only really aired on or around. Take a wild guess, meaning that you only have a chance of seeing this on TV pretty much once a year. At least its sister episode had the novelty of technically being a holiday special, with some pretty funny lines.
I defy you, Heartman!
But the paper is pretty much forgotten otherwise. After sitting down to watch it, I can confidently say that this episode should stay forgotten. The plot is that Squidward throws a wrapper away, and SpongeBob, for some reason, is obsessed with getting the paper to play with it. After a segment that goes on for way too long, Squidward gives it to SpongeBob only to find that SpongeBob has a lot of crazy fun with the paper and can do pretty much anything with it, causing him to want it back. If I'm being honest, I had to skip a lot of this episode. I don't know if it's because I'm getting old or what, but I did not find SpongeBob's constant laughing and shrieking endearing or funny. A majority of this episode is just him making an ass of himself and acting like an obnoxious child. Watching Squidward go through extreme lengths to get the paper back just gives me secondhand embarrassment. The basic plot is actually done leagues better in the episode The Idiot Box later down the line. The premise of both can be boiled down to Squidward being jealous of SpongeBob's childlike imagination and not being able to replicate it himself. However, it works in the Idiot Box because you know that SpongeBob and Patrick aren't doing jack shit in this box, and it's Squidward's imagination that drives himself wild. In the paper, when we see shit like this, and this, is the audience supposed to believe that either A, this paper is magical and Squidward doesn't know how to use it, or B, SpongeBob is built differently and can just do this? Either way, this episode is grating and hard to get through for me. This is easily my least favorite of Season 1 because I didn't even like it. Actually, there are some really funny visual gags with snappy animation, and SpongeBob looks so silly with Squidward's shirt on. But that's all the praise I can give this episode. I think it stinks. I like how this is the trick that initially intrigued Squidward though.
How do you do that?
Like, bro, you can't even physically do that, you don't even have holes. Or does he? To be honest, I don't hate this episode. I'm hesitant to say that I even dislike it. It's just so forgettable and surprisingly boring for an episode featuring King Neptune for the first time in the show's run. SpongeBob and Patrick visit the Fry Cook Museum. Why does this even exist? And see the golden spatula, which only the greatest fry cooks can pull from its rock. SpongeBob pulls it out with ease and summons King Neptune, who can't believe that someone as common and physically unimposing as SpongeBob is worthy of being his fry cook. Thus, a fry cook-off begins. It feels like the competition itself lasts less than half the episode, with the first half being slow and dragging out bits like King Neptune trying to find out who really pulled out the golden spatula, or Patrick getting zapped a bunch of times.
I shall restore him.
The second half isn't that great either, just a predictable moral of quality over quantity, and Neptune becoming SpongeBob's apprentice, which is never followed up on for the entirety of the show. Not only does he rarely appear, but he can't even stick to a consistent design. This episode for me is just not very funny either. It doesn't have a lot going for it to make me like it. The only scenes I found amusing were this one.
Your reward will be great. Behold! Whoopsie.
And this one.
Make poses with me. Okay.
I hope you all know that I didn't notice until recording this bit that I started calling King Neptune King Triton. Like, his name is in the title, and I just put that in the script anyway, because, like, who even is this motherfucker? Moving on to Season 2, much to my surprise, the lowest rated episodes are... I'm not going to be spending a lot of time on these two, so instead I'll give quick summaries. Mrs. Puff gives SpongeBob extra credit, so he can pass her class and she can't worry about him anymore. He fails to pass that, but she passes him anyway to get him off her back. Once she realizes the mistake she made, she seeks out SpongeBob to make sure he can't add to his already established body count with his reckless driving. This is, in my opinion, an underrated episode and I love it. The jokes are consistently funny and I like how batshit insane it is. You have the gag with the French narrator being run over, the extra credit stuff in the beginning that quickly goes off the rails, an imaginary sequence of SpongeBob literally killing people, whatever the fuck this is, Mr. SquarePants maybe being unfaithful to his wife, Mrs. Puff being confirmed to have a criminal past.
I'll have to move to a new city, start a new boating school with a new name. No, not again.
And then her stealing SpongeBob's boat and going to jail. It's a lot of fun to rewatch.
If you think I'll let go for a little... Oh, no!
I'm Your Biggest Fanatic centers around SpongeBob beating his jellyfishing idol, Kevin the Sea Cucumber, who recruits SpongeBob as a lackey without the sponge realizing that he's pretty much there to be the butt of the joke. I do like this episode, just not as much as its sister one. It's pretty funny overall, and while I can understand people being upset at how SpongeBob is treated by the jelly spotters, most of the episode establishes how much better he is than them, and Kevin gets what he deserves by the end.
Wow! I didn't know this was a hat!
It wasn't.
This was also the first full episode of the show I watched when I was a wee one, so it has a special place in my heart. My best wager for the rating on these is that, despite them being silver, it's overshadowed by the gold that is the entire rest of Season 2. I mean, we got Band Geeks this season, arguably the best episode of the show. Still, really good episodes though.
Who wants to lick my cheeks?
But what if I told you that there was another pair of episodes that had the exact same rating? That honor goes to... I have a little bit more to say about Pressure. This episode is about SpongeBob and Sandy competing with one another.
Long live the king.
Leading to them debating about who is better, sea creatures or mammals. Sandy eventually bets that the sea critters can't last a minute on the surface. She loses the bet, but the others spend that minute being chased by seagulls. The episode ends with both sides admitting their strengths and weaknesses. A bit of a sparse summary, isn't it? Okay, so a little bit more than that happens, but this episode feels a bit sparse to me. Not only that, but I find that the main conflict feels very manufactured. It doesn't sit right with me that the crew would laugh at Sandy literally almost killing herself. Is that just me? It feels a little out of character, if only for SpongeBob. I thought the teasing was very mean-spirited as a kid, which made me hate this episode.
Neptune Preserver!
How long can she stay like that?
I don't know.
Sandy's a girl?
But now I think it's more one-sided than anything. Wouldn't it have been cool to see Sandy recruit other mammals for her side? Maybe, oh, I don't know, how about Mr. Krabs' daughter? 4 against 1 isn't all that fair, even if Sandy's stubbornness compensates for the disparity. Other than that, this episode isn't all that interesting to me, but the bit at the end on the surface is pretty fun to watch. There's some funny jokes here and there too.
Ah! Good one, Squidward! Woo!
The smoking peanut has a goofy premise, but it's entertaining enough for me to rank it above the previous episode. After SpongeBob throws a peanut at Clamu at Oyster Stadium, she starts crying in an inconsolable rage. SpongeBob then tries to avoid getting caught for his wrongdoing, all while feeling guilty and dealing with Patrick trying to figure out who the peanut-throwing culprit is. This episode has a good amount of memorable scenes and funny lines, so I don't have much else to say about it. I guess it's kind of a cop-out that SpongeBob wasn't even the one responsible in the end, but Mr. Krabs being overly greedy was set up at the beginning, and again, the episode is still pretty good, so it gets a pass. Not much else to say here.
SpongeBob doesn't have hair? Or does he?
Hey! This motherfucker got them big keys!
Moving on to my personal picks now. I didn't remember much of this episode. In fact, when I tried to remember any funny gags from it, I ended up remembering bits from completely different episodes. Its sister episode is SpongeBob, Sandy, and the Worm, which is a lot of fun and pretty much overshadows Squid on Strike in all aspects. The plot of it is that Krabs becomes even more of a greedy bastard, prompting Squidward to go on strike and him convincing SpongeBob to do the same. There are some parts that were pretty funny, which is customary for all of pre-movie SpongeBob.
Alright, Mr. Krabs!
But I found this episode to be very irritating, when it's not focused on Squidward being incredibly based.
Nobody gives a care about the fate of labor as long as they can get their instant gratification.
It's literally just SpongeBob being a complete moron that ends up ruining anything that was going good for the pair. The Lamborghini? The Bikini Bottomites are also very stupid in this episode. But I'd argue it's more of a lighthearted commentary on group mentality and faux progressivism when it comes to a lot of protests. People who want to be a part of something that sounds important, but ultimately they have no idea what they're really going against or supporting, immediately betraying what they agreed to in the first place. But yeah, as soon as it seems there's going to be somewhat of a compromise between Krabs and the employees, SpongeBob ruins everything, and they are forced to work until after they die, and then the episode ends. Sorry, I don't find that all that funny. Just depressing. At least this episode gives us this very iconic moment.
Squidward! 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 Squidward!
I do like the beginning of this episode. It starts with the most banger title card music. And there are plenty of funny moments.
Hey, a note!
Yeah, but turn it over. There's a letter.
You're right.
And I got this message from my parents.
Patrick is cleaning his place and preparing for his parents to visit for annual Starfish Day? Do all undersea creatures get their own day? Anyway, he wants to be a good host so that they don't still think he's stupid, and SpongeBob hatches the plan to look even dumber than Patrick to make him seem smarter. The episode really does go downhill for me after the parents arrive.
That's for Patrick.
SpongeBob acts like he came from one of those frantic 21st century meme videos instead of just an idiot like the episode sets up. Then, Patrick completely forgets the plan and starts being a jackass to SpongeBob, making fun of who he actually is. The rest of the episode is just Janet, Marty, and Patrick being assholes, doing whatever this is, and then revealing that these aren't even Patrick's parents, and this whole thing was pointless. Which begs the question, how did Janet and Marty even know where and how to find Patrick, and know his name in the first place? Ignoring how creepy it makes this scene, are all starfish supposed to be equally stupid? Is that why Patrick's actual parents couldn't find his house when they were right next door? SpongeBob has this whole breakdown and it's just never resolved? This episode just frustrates me. There are some funny jokes here and there, and this face always makes me laugh. But this episode is pretty mean-spirited, and not a lot of fun to sit through. Not every episode of SpongeBob can be perfect, but the episodes I just finished covering are still pretty good, and most of them can be rewatched fairly often. These next couple, though, are the lowest rated of the entirety of the first 3 seasons, and I'm not looking forward to talking about them. Buckle in, guys, because we're talking about Many of you SpongeBob fans watching this probably saw this one coming. The only other special episodes we've had up to this point in the show are Shanghai and Christmas Who, both being fantastic episodes, and the former being one of my all-time personal favorites. This special, however, is what I consider to be the first of the typical ratings traps we will come to see in the show's lifetime. As in, the animated section is one part and the live-action segments with Patchy doing something similar are the other. In my honest opinion, most of these special episodes, besides being ratings traps like I've already said, are excuses to have these Patchy segments and the animated portions are afterthoughts. Party Pooper Pants, or SpongeBob's House Party as the whole special is advertised as, focuses on SpongeBob finding a kit in the store that tells you how to throw a house party, but things go off the rails when the guests start straying from his very specific schedule. The live-action segment is about Patchy throwing his own house party, which Potty the Parrot thinks is lame and tries to take control of being the host. These parts are pretty fun, and the song that the Bird Brains play is pretty catchy.
The Bird Brains!
Most of the problem lies within the episode itself. SpongeBob is a little bit out of character in the most annoying way possible. I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that our naive Sponge would follow the party planning kit a little too closely and create a tight, unnatural schedule. What does feel out of place is him being so angry at the guests straying from the plan and him freaking out over it. It doesn't come across as entertaining or endearing, it's just grating. Him being arrested for not inviting the cops to the party is also pretty stupid. Even as I sit writing the script, it's hard to recall moments that were really all that funny to me. I remember Patrick's dance, and that track that was lost media for the longest time. That's it. I'm never a fan of characters being written deliberately dumber or differently in order for them to learn a lesson.
Oh, without a doubt, you are the best party thrower ever!
I am?
But you didn't even enjoy the party until after he left. Whatever. Not a lot of fun happens in this episode, and it makes you feel as uncomfortable as one of SpongeBob's party guests. But enough of that. It's time for the Humpback Hop. You know what other episode had the exact same rating as this one? You guessed it right, folks. It's the second ratings trap of the season. Quick, what's the first moment of this episode that comes to your mind? If you're anything like me, it was probably this. Hey, if you're still watching, thank you very much for the support, and let me know in the comments if you want me to make a side video talking about why people found this so scary as kids. Okay, back to the video. Even if you immediately thought of the walk cycle, that's technically incorrect because it's part of a joke in the Patchy segment, not the episode itself. What do you remember from the episode itself? Personally, I remembered SpongeBob wanted to fly, and he flew at some point. I remember the close-up of his ass in this bat suit. I remember Patrick flying at the end. That was pretty funny. Other than that, nothing. Upon rewatching, I didn't really enjoy this one. The Bikini Bottomites spoil it for me. They heckle SpongeBob for his dream, starting a mob against him because they felt personally attacked at SpongeBob actually pursuing his dream. Then they took advantage of him when he could actually fly, then started another mob when he stood up for himself because he owes them favors. Owes you for what? They don't even apologize or anything. They just mourn his pants after they destroy it.
What's that contraption, Spongebob?
That, Patrick, is a flying machine.
Why does this dialogue sound so shit? This episode all around feels needlessly cynical. A plot about someone pursuing an unrealistic dream, those around them making fun of them until it actually comes true, then taking advantage of said person for a ham-fisted moral. This sounds more like a Lifetime movie, or maybe an episode of Clone High if they took the parody route, especially the joke of Patrick being able to casually fly this whole time. It feels out of place for SpongeBob. The parody angle would have worked if this episode was really funny, but it isn't.
Above, these are the things that I love. Even Plankton needs some help when he gets tangled in the cat.
Oh my god, finish the line! Once again, the Patchy segments are more entertaining, with him going through great lengths to find the supposed lost episode, and raging over the fact that it was just a bunch of cheap walk cycles. It's pretty funny how they just play this section in reverse once he changes his mind. May I just add really quick, the gimmick of this being the lost episode of SpongeBob is pretty dumb and blatantly grabbing for views. There was allegedly this star-studded ad campaign of these celebrities looking for the lost episode, and for all of that to amount to this, it doesn't pay off for me at all. Side note, why does this remembering SpongeBob bit at the beginning, and this part at the end make it seem like SpongeBob died? You've got a bit more to go before that happens. The episode should have ended here in my opinion. Wouldn't that have saved us time and been funnier? But yeah, pretty bad episode in my opinion. Oh, but what's this? There's one more special episode that is rated higher than these two? Well, guess what? I don't like this one either. Let's talk about it.
SpongeBob SquarePants BC Before Comedy with your host.
3 specials in one season? Is it just me? Or is this foreshadowing how these ratings traps got more and more desperate as the show went on? I don't know. To me, it seems like the behaviors of post-movie seasons started showing up around here. Maybe that's just me. Anyway, SpongeBob BC is very appropriately named because the BC stands for Before Comedy, and the animated episode is titled Ugh. Sums up how I feel about it. The whole thing is just the caveman ancestors of our main characters, Spongegar, Patar, and Squog, as they discover fire, learn how to cook things, and try to steal the fire from each other. And it's dumb. Am I a jerk for saying that? The entire episode needs to be carried by the visuals and comedic timing, since all of the characters speak in dumb caveman speak. And it doesn't do it for me personally. It felt like I was watching a YouTube Kids video. Dumb visuals with stupid baby noises that goes nowhere and means nothing. This scene of Spongegar's epiphany used to freak me out as a kid. I know now it's a 2001 A Space Odyssey reference, but it's still distressing for young audiences. And who are these guys? Get out of here. Oh yeah, there are Patchy segments too, I guess. Patchy and Poddy argue over whether the past or the future is cooler. Patchy brings a caveman, Poddy brings a robot, and the two end up making a song about how both eras have good qualities and that they work best together. This song also makes me feel like I'm losing my mind, and not in an entertaining way. In a, I'm losing brain matter by watching YouTube Kids at 2:37 AM way. Also, Patchy gets eaten by a dinosaur and it looks like shit. Yeah, this episode is boring and mind-numbing. Spongegar, Squan, and Bimpus get annoying pretty fast for me. It's just a whole lot of nothing, and definitely not worth being a special. The caveman bit worked a lot better in SB129. Hold your horses, don't click off yet, because I've got one more Season 3 episode to discuss. To be quite honest, I've talked way too much about episodes that make me upset, so I'll keep this one brief so we can wrap this up. I don't like SpongeBob being an asshole coach and abusing Gary. That's basically it. It takes up a huge chunk of the episode, and watching Gary literally break into pieces and self-destruct wasn't funny at all for me. It felt too much. Well, fuck you all too. I know SpongeBob shows remorse for how he was acting, but it comes too little too late to feel like it really meant anything, and the way it's delivered doesn't make me laugh either. It's a shame too, because the rest of this episode is honestly pretty good, and there are a lot of funny moments, this one being one of my all-time faves.
The first place snail racing cup presented to Squidward, Tortellini!
The ending coming back around to Sandy wanting to beat up Spongebob is also an entertaining payoff. But yeah, once again, the meanness and slightly out of character behavior brings the rest of this episode down for me. Before I wrap up this video, I'm going to touch on a couple episodes that almost made the list, but I ended up liking way more on rewatch. As a kid, it made me mad to see Squidward and Krabs bully SpongeBob for his Pretty Patty idea, but it doesn't bother me anymore. The rest of the episode is a lot of fun, and Krabs gets what he deserved, so it all worked out. As a kid, it made me mad to see the Bikini Bottomites bully SpongeBob for having a kiss on... Okay, I know y'all are seeing a pattern. I was a really sensitive kid, and seeing my favorite characters being mistreated made me feel like someone was ripping my heart out of my chest, so yeah, it was a bit hard to enjoy scenes like this. But even after I got over that feeling with age, the episode felt kinda weird to me, because of the whole SpongeBob wants to be treated like an actual baby by his grandma, instead of getting loved and a bit spoiled like he was in the beginning. And I can't really put my finger on it, but this episode was just kinda whatever. Like, I just don't care about it. There are enough funny jokes to keep it off the list though.
Oh, you must acquire a taste for freeform jazz.
As this was attached to the special Shanghai, it's a bit shorter than most episodes, so I had it on the list for being forgettable, but upon rewatch, it's honestly fucking hilarious and really quotable, so I took it off.
Gary! There's a bomb strapped to my chest!
Before rewatching, I kept confusing this episode with No Free Rides in my mind, due to the similar themes of Mrs. Puff and A Life of Crime. I was going to put it down as another forgettable episode, and while it isn't the most memorable, it's still pretty enjoyable. Can we talk about how Mrs. Puff basically loses her mind, resigned to being forced to relive the same time loop over and over again, and then the episode just ends with no resolution? Jeez, that's dark. I know this is SpongeBob we're talking about, and there's like almost no continuity, but still. Honestly, this part alone saves the episode from the list.
It's just my imagination again.
So what's for dinner tonight, Puff Mama? Chili?
So, what did you think about the episodes discussed today? Anything you agree with? Disagree with? I think it's a testament to how good SpongeBob's first 3 seasons are that none of these episodes are actually all that bad. Sure, I think the season 3 specials are duds, but all of these episodes undeniably have fun stuff in them. The lowest rated of these is a 7.7, which only looks bad in comparison to the consistent 8s and 9s this show once regularly produced. They're still solid and show that these writers really gave it their all. This video isn't meant to attack any writers or anything like that, I just felt like taking a look at some early SpongeBob episodes that may not be as good as we remembered them as children. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Feel free to leave your opinions in the comments. And maybe now, during your annual rewatch of early SpongeBob, you'll know which episodes are better off skipping.